From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I am Saini Gray. We begin in Cuba, where the Assembly will start discussing the preliminary draft of the new constitution on Monday. The Assembly is set to discuss the new project until the 15th of November. Millions of Cubans will also participate in the debate in a solid demonstration of popular power, democracy. The constitution draft will then be submitted for a referendum. The constitutional project ratifies the socialist character of the island and the role of the Communist Party, but proposes changes in the state structure.
Socialism is not a system as such, because it doesn't have any mode of production in the Marxist sense. Rather, it is a transition to another system, which is communism. In my opinion, we should keep the aspiration of building a society radically different from capitalism. It is true that this isn't an aspiration we can achieve in the short term, but it serves as a utopia that we strive for.
Argentina's former president, Cristina Fernández de Kirchner, has appeared in court to testify in a corruption scandal that allegedly took place during her term in office. The case digs into an alleged network in which businessmen would have paid bribes in exchange for public contracts. However, some say this is a new form of persecution against a progressive Latin American leader, similar to what is happening with the former Brazilian president, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, and Ecuador's former president, Rafael Correa. Our correspondent, Sabrina Roth, brings us more.
This morning, former President and current Senator Cristina Fernández de Kirchner appeared in court to testify in a corruption case. It's important to remember that the case involves the driver of one of the most influential people in the Ministry of Federal Planning, who allegedly kept journals that detailed a supposed bribery scheme linked to public projects. But those accused are denouncing that the journals haven't been presented as evidence until now. On her part, the former president didn't respond to any questions from the judge or the prosecution, but presented a statement. The hearing started at 10 in the morning local time. The Senate is expected to debate possible raids on the homes of the former president in an attempt to remove her from immunity. This follows the trend of persecution seen in the region against politicians associated with left-wing governments.
Thousands of Brazilians have continued their march for the freedom of the former Brazilian president, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. Activists were marching a 30-kilometer route this weekend in support of Lula's presidential candidacy and to demand his release from prison. They are also denouncing state privatization of public holdings by the President Michel Temer's government. The march will arrive to Brasilia, where participants are expected to demand that Lula be allowed to register as a presidential candidate. The 7 members of the Popular Farmers Movement on hunger strike for Lula's freedom have performed a religious ceremony. The hunger strikers haven't eaten in 13 days and said they will continue to strike until Lula is released. The activists are also denouncing the increase of poverty, violence, and the situation or the poor situation of public health in their country. Our correspondent, Andrew Vieira, has more.
We are following the demonstrations in support of former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. This morning, a religious ceremony is taking place just outside the home of Judge Edson Fachin, in charge of the investigation Lava Jato. The 7 people on hunger strike are taking part of the ceremony, and also leaders of different religions. They are demanding Judge Fachin that the Supreme Court of Brazil deliver justice as they denounce Lula as a political prisoner. They are also asking the Supreme Court to be impartial and not please political interests. Leaders from different social organizations joined the demonstration, and also members of the landless movement, youth and agriculture movements. On Wednesday, demonstrators are expected to lead a big event to support the registration of Lula's presidential candidacy. More than 50,000 people are expected to join. We will keep following the Lula Free March as it unfolds in Brasilia.
Meanwhile, the U.S. Secretary of Defense James Mattis has started his Latin American tour in Brazil. Mattis will meet with his Brazilian counterpart Joaquim Silva y Luna and the Foreign Minister Aloysio Nunes to discuss the use of a local military base as well as weapon trade agreements. The U.S. Secretary of Defense will also visit Chile, Colombia and Argentina in an attempt to balance China's approach to the Latin American region, and that's according to analysts. The Supreme Court of Colombia has rejected a habeas corpus petition filed by the former FARC member Jesus Santrich for the second time. Santrich was detained on April 9th after the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration accused him of agreeing to export 10 tons of cocaine to the United States. He has denied all of the charges against him, and FARC members have criticized his detention, saying that it threatens the peace accords signed in Cuba in 2016. Our correspondent in Bogotá, Paulo Fernandez, has more.
Un saludo para usted y para los televidentes. Mucha atención porque en las últimas...
The Supreme Court in Bogotá ratified the prosecutor's decision in Jesus Santrich's detention, arrested in La Picota prison complex since April 9th. The court also rejected the habeas corpus presented by Santrich's defense, as they said he cannot file a request based on parliamentary immunity, as he has not taken his seat in Congress. The court relies on the prosecutor now to continue with Santrich's case, including the extradition request filed by the United States. This is the second time the court in Bogotá rejects a petition by Santrich's defense. In April, the court also rejected a petition for his release. With this decision, justice bans Santrich to take oath in Congress and to participate in politics. For that reason, Santrich says he's a political prisoner. Meanwhile, his defense team continues to work in finding a way so he can take his seat in Congress.
Now, still in Colombia, President Ivan Duque urged the National Liberation Army, or ELN, to release 3 soldiers the armed group kidnapped in order to continue the peace talks. Duque also asked the ELN to release the other 6 people believed to have been kidnapped by the guerrilla group before any peace negotiation can proceed. The new president added that he will not accept any intimidation or blackmail as a mechanism to pressure his government.
Pero el mensaje es uno y es muy claro.
There's only one message, and it's very clear. If the ELN has a genuine desire for demobilization, disarmament and reinsertion, it must release the hostages quickly and unconditionally, because I, as president, will not accept Colombians who intimidate us with kidnapping.
We'll take a short break now, but join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. Venezuelans have marched once again on Monday to support President Nicolas Maduro. Thousands of citizens dressed in red marched to the capital Caracas to defend the country's sovereignty and independence after Maduro's assassination attempt on August 4th. Over the weekend, Maduro shared images taken from the phones of the alleged authors of the assassination attempt. The photos showed the place where the accused performed training exercises with the drones used in the attack. And the government of Bolivia has announced that it will regulate the use of drones. The announcement comes just after the assassination attempt on the life of President Nicolas Maduro on August 4th. In a press conference, Bolivian President Evo Morales explained that his government will discuss how to implement the new regulation, as drones have become a new threat for national security. The government also made a call to Colombia to reconsider its decision to leave UNASUR. Bolivia's foreign ministry published a statement asking Colombia to reflect on the values of integration and its importance for the Latin American people beyond any ideological difference. It also expressed its will to find new mechanisms to make UNASUR work. Colombia announced its decision to leave UNASUR over the weekend.
Carlos Holmes Trujillo, Foreign Minister of Colombia, announced that the Colombian government will leave the Union of South American Nations, UNASUR.
The document is ready. We haven't sent it yet, but we are discussing with other governments that apparently would like to take the same path. So after discussing this situation, we could act together. But if not, Colombia will submit all the required documentation, and after 6 months, we will withdraw from UNASUR. It is an irreversible decision.
Former President Juan Manuel Santos suspended Colombia's UNASUR membership, but the definite departure from the organization is a decision that will affect the relationships with other South American nations.
It is very serious because UNASUR is the only political platform with permanent coordination mechanisms. South America did not have another political coordination system. We all know that the OAS has been taken over by the United States, which makes it very difficult for our region.
Meanwhile, Trujillo was questioned about the extradition order requested by the Venezuelan government of opposition leader Julio Borges and several Colombian citizens involved in the attacks against President Maduro, but his response was not clear.
The extradition order has not arrived. I do not know any official action on that matter. We will analyze it, only if it does arrive on time.
For the international analyst Mauricio Jaramillo, the extradition request is something that should be studied within the framework of the agreements signed by the two nations and not by ideological position.
I think that the extradition request is important because we need to have good diplomatic relations in our regional dialogue. Making a wrong decision could have a negative effect on both sides of the border.
For now, there are fears that Colombia's foreign policy may suffer a radical turnover which could destabilize the whole region.
Threats to journalists continue to increase as human rights defenders have declared that press freedom in Colombia is endangered. The Press Freedom Foundation has said around 200 Colombian journalists currently need personal security after their lives were threatened, a mechanism that costs around $100 million. According to the Press Freedom Organization, the risks for journalists have increased after the last electoral campaign. The foundation calls for a better mechanism of protection that also eliminates impunity. The United Nations Children's Fund, or UNICEF, has warned of an increase in violence against women in Colombia, especially towards girls and teenagers. According to UNICEF, girls have suffered 73% of the sexual violence reported in the country. The Colombian Institute of Legal Medicine also reported an increase in gender violence in 2017. Girls between the ages of 10 and 14 were victims in 86% of all cases, and Colombia is considered to be one of the most dangerous countries in Latin America to be a woman. And a video of a man beating his wife before killing her has shocked Brazil. The footage from a security camera in a parking garage elevator recorded the beating. The man allegedly threw her minutes later from a window to her death. In Brazil, 1,133 women were killed in 2017 as a result of gender-based violence, an average of 175 killings per day. Over 60,000 women are raped, an increase in sexual violence of more than 8% compared to 2016. A group of lawmakers in Chile will present a bill this Tuesday to legalize abortion. Lawmakers want abortion to be covered by the public health system up to the 14th week of pregnancy, just like the bill in the Argentinian Senate, which failed to pass last week. Abortion is legal in the country, but only when the mother's life is at risk, if the fetus will not survive the pregnancy, and in the case of rape. The discussion on the choice to abort in Argentina raised a new wave of women's protests in Latin America and across the world. In the last decade, Uruguay has changed its migration policy, and as a result, there has been increased immigrant arrivals to the country. A recent study conducted by the Social Protection Bank explores the effects of this movement.
Migratory flows have varied significantly in Latin America, especially in Uruguay. The democratic stability, its advanced labor relations, and its free access to education and health have turned the country into an attractive destination for the migrant collectives.
After 2008, there was an important change, and that's when a new reality occurred. People begin to look for opportunities in Uruguay, but they also see Uruguay as a friendly country. We are a country that has a very generous legislation with a worker that comes to Uruguay.
The Social Protection Bank took a look into which sectors of the economy benefit the most with the arrival of these workers. Trade and agricultural production are located in the first places, with almost 10,800 jobs. Following sectors are the manufacturing industry, administrative activities, teaching, accommodation, and food services. Despite this, entering the job market is not easy.
In terms of getting a job, it's very difficult. It was very hard for me. I left my resume everywhere, but nobody called me, so I decided to start working as a freelancer. I believe many immigrants become entrepreneurs.
The report also refers to the average school training migrants who arrive in Uruguay. 45% of them have third-level studies, seen as a great value and opportunity.
They are overqualified compared to the national average. This does not have to scare people. On the contrary, it's good news. There are people who can work where there are vacancies, so they are not actually competing with national workers.
While it's true that foreign workers add up to 34,086, the number of jobs available reach 35,875. This implies that many occupy more than one work position. According to the Social Protection Bank, the enrollment of foreign workers in the job market is still low, with figures close to 2.3%.
In Guatemala, the business group Renance SA continues to threaten campesino leaders for opposing the construction of a hydroelectric plant over the Cahabon River.
Rogelio Cac is one of the leaders of the Quechua people that has been politically persecuted by the state and by the hydroelectric company Renace S.A. This time, he appeared in court.
The public prosecutor's office charged him with 2 crimes: legal detention and incitement to commit a crime. We did everything we could to prove his innocence, but after some time, the judge decided to charge him.
Rogelio is native of the Panzamalá de Carchá community in Alta Verapaz. He was captured and incarcerated after leading a communal land claim against the hydroelectric company Renace S.A.
They are occupying our reserve. That's why we've come here to see how we can recover this land. But unfortunately, it didn't turn out well. That is why they ordered the arrest of Rogelio Cac.
Authorities have issued 3 other arrest warrants. People in the community are worried about this because they say the justice system is criminalizing them for defending their land.
Many are now in jail only for defending their territory. The system has been unfair. What is happening is legal but illegitimate.
In the same region, Bernardo Calxol, leader of Santa Maria Cahabon, was arrested for opposing another hydroelectric project pushed by the company OSEC.
They are violating our rights. The only thing we want is to take care of what our parents gave us. We want to preserve it and protect it for our children.
Community leaders say that they are persecuted by the private companies that are leading the construction of various hydroelectric plants near the Cabon River.
Time now for another break, but join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. On Sunday, hundreds of counter-protesters marched in Washington, D.C. against a white supremacist rally outside the White House. Washington police closed streets and erected a barricade around a public park to make sure the white supremacists and the counter-protesters did not clash. Black Lives Matter activists were also out in force against the far-right rally to send out a strong message against white supremacy. The rally came just a year after the activist Heather Heyer was killed in Charlottesville, Virginia, by a far-right demonstrator who drove his car into a crowd of counter-protesters.
It's a trick. Don't fight negative with negative. Pour so much love out your heart that they've got all they can do is swallow it. That's right. We smart and black is beautiful. Black is resilient. Black is intelligent. Black is survivors. Black is legendary. Black is powerful. Black, we got longevity. Look at our skin. Black don't crack, baby.
And Pakistan's former Prime Minister has appeared in court, his first court appearance since he was sentenced for corruption in July. So here's more on that and some other stories making headlines around the world.
Pakistan's jailed former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif attended a court hearing for the first time to account for 2 corruption cases against him and his family. He's currently serving a 10-year sentence in Rawalpindi. His daughter Mariam was also sentenced to 7 years over the purchase of luxury flats in London. His next hearing is set for August the 15th. A Taliban offensive on the Afghan city of Ghazni has entered its 4th day and has claimed over 300 lives, including at least 20 civilians, according to government reports. Afghan forces have been battling the Taliban ever since they stormed the city. Around 194 Talibs have also been killed.
The enemies of Afghanistan had come all together from adjacent provinces, launched massive attacks and killed many of our people and security forces, as well as partially destroying our historic city of Ghazni.
More than 430 people have been killed and over 350,000 displaced after a 6.9 magnitude earthquake wreaked havoc on Indonesia's Lombok Island a week ago. Bodies are still being pulled from the level buildings. People are taking refuge in makeshift tents near their homes or evacuation centres. Medical facilities have also been set up as some hospitals were also destroyed in the earthquake.
And Muslims across the world are getting ready for Eid al-Adha, or the Festival of Sacrifice. In the Pakistani city of Karachi, cows are lifted by a crane from the roof of a building as families prepare their animals before the holiday. Muslims sacrifice animals as a way to commemorate Ibrahim's willingness to sacrifice his son Isaac to obey God's command, a story also recognized by Jews and Christians. God finally intervened to sacrifice a lamb instead of the child, and now families divide the animal into 3 parts to be shared with the poor and also with friends and relatives. Spectacular pictures there. We've come to the end of this news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website at telstartv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telstar English, I'm Sony Gray. Thank you for watching.
A quest in the nature to find their roots.
Nosotros somos parte de la